This is Family Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air for the first time with Marcus Norman. And we'd like to thank you for being on the show. And we do have to mention a sponsor. We are on Newsly, which you can go to your iOS or Android store and use coupon code GHOST2021 to get 1 month free premium subscription so you can stop scrolling and start listening. So they take any kind of podcast like this that's video and translate it to audio so you can have it on the go. And this podcast episode will be on Newsly after like an hour. So you can check it out there with all your friends and get 1 month free premium subscription. If you use Ghost 2021, you'll get that. So thank you again for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's an honor. I appreciate it.
So we typically have this format where we go kind of stream of consciousness, like live asking people questions about who they are. We tend to talk about people who are creators, but you have a lot of different businesses and you have another podcast, and we've been opening up our podcast to talking to other podcasters. So I see that you have a multitude of businesses, a bunch of different things you want to go into. So I'm not sure which one you want to focus on. I know you have your gentleman style podcast and you have your investment firm and so which one do you really want to focus on tonight?
Let's focus on podcasting. How about that?
That's cool. So what made you get into podcasting? What brought you into this scene?
What brought me into the scene of podcasting was people were not doing well, and you had to go to a multitude of different spaces and places to find information on particular topics that you're interested in. For example, real estate, money, finances, investing, recession, COVID-19, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Pandemic, and the vaccine. And so wanted to go into podcasting because I wanted to help people do better, and I wanted to provide a single source, whatever the topic may be, with a foundation based on God and Christianity. But I wanted people to have a single source that they could go to and reference, to find those experts, to find the help that they need, whether it be in the mental health space, whether it be banking or finance or investing, or whether it be real estate, or whether it be sex, right? And so my podcast helps in a number of different areas so that we can do better.
Well, that's a cool thing to be into. What year did you get into this? Just recently, or you've been doing it since the pandemic?
I've been podcasting since 2014. Get that. So 2014, but it was revamped in the pandemic. So I used to do a talking point where I was just speaking to the audience, and I was just
Mhm.
talking to the audience. And then during the pandemic, someone reached out to me. It was a young lady, and she reached out to me because she found my podcast, and she said, "I would like to be a guest on your show." And that flipped the switch for me, and I was like, let me not
Change.
be the expert, let me switch it. And so ever since her, I've invited guests onto the show, and now guests are starting to find me. And it's been amazing ever since. And so I revamped the show to what you see now in
Mhm.
the pandemic.
Now, previously, was it audio only, or were you always video?
It was previously audio only with some video. So it
Mhm.
was always audio. I started with audio, and then I would do snippets of lives and discussions. And like I said, I was just talking to you with what I was expert in: finance, real estate, and those areas. And I was just talking to the audience and writing down a script and talking to you. And
Mhm.
but it was so very so often you'd get a video of me talking to you, but it was primarily audio only. Yes.
Yeah, because I started back in 2016, and I'm primarily a music producer. And some guy found me on my SoundCloud, and he was on an app called Spearman. And Spearman was an audio app that was previous to like Anchor. And I started there, and then I moved to Anchor. They actually pointed me to Anchor because I was doing all these international calls with musicians like in Australia and Japan and all these places. And then the app stopped working. It wouldn't do a call in Japan. It used to. It would be able to do one in Australia, and then suddenly it couldn't. So I asked them what's going on, and they say, "Oh yeah, Apple iOS made a change, and we can't do it, but Anchor can." And I was like, that was really cool because business people, they realized they couldn't do it and they pointed me to a company that did. And I never seen that before. So I thought that was pretty cool.
That was a sweet pivot.
Yeah, it was really interesting. And then I found StreamYard and I started interviewing bands, and I had always been focused on bands, right? And then I got into actors, and then I got into influencers, then I got into other podcasters, and now I talk to mentors too. And and I thought the video gave you an element that, I've been for years doing audio, but I really loved the video. And I wanted your opinion when you switched from audio to video. Did you really, was it like a revelation in terms of like what you could do with it?
When I switched to audio to video, it was a revelation for me. It was a huge stepping stone for me because that it was next level. We always want to know what's next level for us. And so that was next level for me. It's like, okay, now I got to show my face. I can't hide behind because
Yeah,
as a
yeah,
music producer, you can hide behind the audio all day. No one knows,
yeah.
what you look like or who you look like, and you can sound like whoever due to sound effects and
Oh, yeah,
T-Pain, right? So
yeah,
the so I can sound like whoever I want. But when you go live, it's next level. It really changes the dynamic. And now you have to be kind of a different person, a different presenter. Yeah. You're in the entertainment business once you go live.
yeah. And one thing I found is like, did you ever want to totally control your podcast and not do live and actually do it recorded and then edit? Or were you the kind of person that said, hey, I don't have a problem going live like a radio show. I'm going to go live. Did you ever kind of think about like, I want to make it perfect, so I'm actually going to edit before I publish? Or were you always live?
Originally, so yes, I wanted full control. And so I wanted that full control. I wanted to edit it, I wanted to polish it, I wanted to make it sound perfect. And like I said, I had a script for my
Mhm.
audio. So I would write down what the talking points, how long I'm gonna stay on a particular topic. Because when you go live, like you said, it's a different ball game, and you have to. You got to be on it. You have to
Yeah.
be in it.
Yeah.
Um, you can't be reading from a script because no one knows.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was a different atmosphere. So when I went live with it, it made me better. It made me a better. So a little backstory about me. My dad was a disc jockey,
Oh,
and
okay. So
so
you have some background.
so he spoke well, and he was known as Mojo D. And I would always hear him. He always had the latest records, always had the hottest songs. And just growing up listening to him, honing his craft, honing his skills. So it rubbed off on me. And so I
Yeah.
said, I could do this. And so
Yeah.
now, this is what I do with podcasting. I'm a personality, right? You see my
Yeah.
personality and it comes out.
Well, I think it's really interesting, because like I talk to musicians, and I am a musician. I'm a keyboardist. I'm a old school, like Roland, Moog, Yamaha, Hammond B3 type of guy. Parliament Funkadelic. I grew up listening to James Brown. I'm 55. My dad had Chess Records. He had all the Motown. He had all the soul records, and my older brother had Hendrix. He's like 7 years older, and I'm like, wow, Funkadelic, Hendrix, Brown. I'm like, that's it. And then I got into Sun Ra and Miles, and I'm like, yeah, that's it. And then I just like just focused on music, and then I found that music, interfaces with art. You have to have, deal with photographers, you deal with artists, you deal with actors and music videos. And I started expanding, into now talking to other podcasters, and going live. One of the reasons I like to do that is I do what I call stream of consciousness recording. I kind of do jam style recording where I just do live recording and let it go onto tape and then listen and work on things. And I found that doing podcast in that manner is kind of like, a jazz band that goes into a fusion kind of situation. They come back to the main theme, they come back and they go in and out. And I was like, yeah, I like that. I like that. Feels better to me, feels more natural to me. So I think seems like you had the same kind of revelation.
It did. It did. Once I did several interviews and interviewed some folk, it did become natural to me and I really didn't even realize how good at it I could have been. And I was like, once I interviewed that first guest, my very first guest, um, I wanted more. I wanted to do it again. I wasn't scared of it. I wasn't deterred from it. I was like, oh man, that was horrible. I don't want to do it again. Like kind of like you, I wanted to perfect it. And I've
Mhm.
always been that way. I've always wanted to perfect the things and become really good at what I'm doing. And so I was in it. Once I went live with her and I did a whole episode, I literally ended the show and I was like, whoo, when's the next one?
Did
When's my
you
next
have
guest?
now you said people were coming to you, but how did you start getting guests? Like I found I have a way I did it, but I kinda wanna hear how did you approach, like, once you decided you weren't gonna just be the center and you were gonna bring in guests, did you have, like, a plan on how to get guests?
Absolutely not. So the lady that reached out to me, I asked her because when she emailed me, I was shocked. She emailed me and she said, "Hey, I want to be a guest on your show. I want to talk about relationships." And I said, and I had no setup, I had no camera, I had no microphone. I had a Blue Yeti. This is my very first. This is my
Yeah,
very first microphone. This is all I had. And she's
yeah.
like, "No, I want to go live." And I said, "Sure." I had no idea what I was doing, and I had to figure out how to go live within a week.
Wow.
And
And were
and
you, like, physically was she physically coming to your studio to do it with you or doing it online?
she was doing it online, similar to this, just like this. And I had to figure it all out in a week.
Wow, at that time, what, 2014, did they have a tool like StreamYard? Did they have, like, a
No.
restream? What do you do, like, YouTube?
So what I did is what did I do? 2014 is when I started podcasting. When she found me, it was probably, I want to say 2018,
Mhm,
2017, right
okay.
before everything kicked off. So StreamYard was around then.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so I did some quick research. I said StreamYard, there's other platforms, there's Restream, there's Zoom, and I didn't
yeah,
want to do Zoom. And
yeah.
so I wanted to be able to manipulate my guests on screen and do a whole bunch of stuff. And that's how I found the platform that I am. And then I interviewed her on StreamYard, and that's what I use.
Mhm.
Unbeknownst to her, and she told me after the show, I laughed. She's like, "This is the most professional show I've ever been on." I said, "Thanks." No idea. I just slapped it together. No idea.
Well, you did the research, and that's the core. I did it as a musician. I like this platform because I can hook my mixer up to it, and then I got this mic, and podcasting. A company gave me this mic, and it's like I started getting opportunities where like because I'm talking to musicians, I start getting gear, talk about gear, be able to get into it, and I'm already knew about mics because I'm a musician, and then I knew about mixers. I said, well, how do I get a podcast mixer? So I started doing the research and figured out which one to get. And then I said, well, I could use some of my vocal, mics that I already had for recording albums. But I said, well, there are some things I want to do with like radio type of voice and preamps, and I started getting really deep into all that production stuff. But you don't have to. When I first started on Anchor, I was just using my phone. you
What?
know, yeah, yeah. I was just using the phone for the first year. I just used the phone.
Well, that's really good. That is really good. I mean, the phone quality today is superb, right? You'd never
Oh,
know.
yeah. Like an iPhone at the time, it was doing all right. It's just not as good as what this can do. This can do a lot better. And, being able to use webcams and OBS and all kinds of other stuff you can use. Yeah, there's a lot of tech you can get into. But I just like the feel. And I think this was the thing, like from going from an audio podcast where you don't see your guest. So you don't see the body language, you don't get the cues. When I started getting the video, and I actually, it was really cool to actually physically see the person. And I think I think that actually makes you a better interviewer when you can actually, pick up on the cues that people are giving you
Yeah,
visually.
very true. Very true. You're so
So,
right.
so, um, so like I started finding guests because I'm on Instagram, right? And
Okay.
tons of musicians are there. And my approach was I put out posts all the time. And then when another musician actually said they liked my post, I actually had a pitch saying, "Hey, I interview other musicians. Do you want to come on the show? What's your time zone?" And I started getting people from Australia and Europe and Japan, like everywhere. And I was like, wow. And I just been doing that. I've done like 750 episodes. since I started, and
Congrats.
it just exploded. I mean, I've interviewed two Grammy award winning producers, and they just found me. Kind of like people start finding you. Did you start getting? Who's the most interesting person that actually came to you rather than you going to them?
Um, whew, who's the most interesting person that found me? The most interesting. I've had some very interesting guests. I've had some very interesting guests. I to say the least. I guess for me, too many. I mean, this. So okay, I'll give you this. The most interesting guest I had. So my podcast is called Gentleman Style Podcast, God, Family, Self Finance. The most interesting guest that would contradict my podcast, seemingly contradict my podcast, is Mr. John Folis. He owned a PR company and he did a documentary, a film. He edited, created it, produced it, film on his own. Um, and he talks about um Christians leaving God and leaving Christianity. And most people would who have a podcast with a foundation of God would not have him. And
Yeah,
so when we chatted and when we talked, he pushed me away at first because he's like, "Oh, you're like everybody else. You're just gonna, try and convert me. You're gonna try and get me back to Christianity." I did not take that approach with him, and
mm.
that to date that has 8,000 views.
I think
Um,
that's really cool because like to have an open discussion. Some people can kind of get stuck in their lane. In my industry, people get like analog versus digital, and that's not as heavy as God or not God. But yeah, there are some people who are really crazy about it. They're like I'm not using digital. I'm only doing analog. And if you try to tell them something else, they're like, nope, I don't want to talk to you. so so it's like, it's not as heavy as what you were saying, but I understand the kind of dynamic. Like if you get somebody who's like, well, I don't want to deal with that Jones out there, that Phantom. He's always doing all this analog stuff, and that's like old. That's like 70s. We don't live in the 70s.
but it's
you know.
still necessary and it's still reliable, right?
Yeah, I
Analog
still
versus
yeah.
digital USB, it's more reliable, it's more clean, it's clear.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I have a Moog. I got like 3 Moogs because there's something about it. If you ask like Bernie Worrell from Funkadelic, you're like, why did you play Moog? Because it made the funk. you know, it's part of that. Why did Stevie play it? Because it's funky. It actually has a lot of bass. It's booming, and it's more. It has more sound bottom than a digital device. It actually feels more like a real bass, something that Bootsy would play. That's why you use it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. See, this is the DJ talk. See, he's speaking to my inner a DJ disc jockey in me. And dad, I hope you're watching. So I hope I'm making you proud right now. But my dad would
So
love
so
this.
on
He would eat this up.
so on your show, you said you do like culture, relationships, dating, and everything in between. Like, what's the most popular topic, or doesn't matter because you have a very wide canvas of what you talk about? Do you tend to have more like shows about dating or relationships, or is there any particular area that you find yourself doing more than others?
So no particular. I think I do very well in spreading it out. To date, my most viewed interview that I've done is an interview I did on real estate, and real estate has been a topic since the dinosaurs. I feel like everybody has a real estate podcast. So that interview, has I think it's over like 30,000 views right now,
Hmm.
and is continuing to rise. But I think I really specialize in the taboo, right? The unique. So a very powerful interview that I did that's doing well is also is how to start your own ATM business.
Oh wow.
That's unique. It's different. It's not the traditional, let me tell you the 5 keys to success, right? Even though that's necessary, people want to know step by step. People want to know what people are doing right now, not necessarily things that I have to work on, I have to develop, or mindset shift. Those are still good, but they have their time and place. Tell me the secret to money right now, or tell me the secret to better sex right now, or tell me the secret to Bitcoin and cryptocurrency right now as it stands. And I think that's where I really am honing my craft in. Um, so that's why I typically do. So I think I do a really good job of spreading it all out. I don't do
Mhm.
too much real estate. I don't do too much relationships. I don't do too much investing. I kind of balance it all out. And
Very
I've actually,
expansive.
huh?
Very expansive.
Yeah, I spread it out. I try to really spread it. I don't want to become a real estate podcast, if that makes sense.
Well, I think that's why I started opening up from just dealing with music. Now, there's not a super amount of podcasts that focus just on music. In fact,
True.
since I started, it's actually started to drop down where other things are get more views. But I've been able to expand into other areas in the same way that you had the real estate, you have dating, you have all these other things. That I started getting into these other things that I still find interesting and can actually help my audience. I started talking to, like, SEO experts.
Yeah.
So people who are musicians, they need to do better SEO to get their stuff out there, right? I talk to vocal coaches because if you're a singer, you probably be cool to have an hour-long lesson from a real good vocal coach that actually could teach you something. So I try to have these kind of teaching moments. So do you feel that you're actually like a teacher?
I
Or-
think so. I think I'm a teacher, I'm an educator, I'm a mentor and a guide. I want to guide people on what's happening now because I truly want to help people. And you just brought up a really great point. Um I had to expand the show. Most people when they hear Gentleman Style Podcast, they think the show is for men.
Yeah,
And
right.
originally it was. Originally, when I first started, I said, "This is a podcast just for men. I'm gonna just help my men. I'm gonna just be out there for men." And then I realized I had a very hard time getting men on the show. So I was struggling with getting men on the show, and more, I was getting more women. More women were just more open to sharing. They were more open to
That's
giving back.
interesting.
And so I struggled with that, and I just said, you know what? I want to help everybody. And so now I really advocate for pushing guests who can help both sides, not just men, not just women. Whatever information, whatever it is you have to share has to benefit both men and women. And so that's been I had to transition. That was my pivot. So you just reminded me of that. I had to switch up my mindset.
That's very interesting because, like, one of my big kind of claim to fame is like I tend to interview 80% of my guests that are musicians were female singer songwriters that were emerging artists worldwide that weren't getting attention because they weren't getting booked on like the typical music podcast because they were only wanting to talk to the guys. They only wanted to talk to the male centered bands. And so they couldn't get on. And then I found a niche where I started getting tons of like female singer songwriters from around the world,
Yeah.
Sweden, Japan. I'm actually working with a Japanese producer. A lady is like fantastic who lives in Tokyo, and I'm working with a South African lady that's a video game developer doing a soundtrack on her video game. Because
Nice.
I many years ago I decided, like, why not listen to some of the women artists are actually doing very interesting things in music that people sometimes don't pay attention to, but it's very dynamic and there's a lot going on. So I find it interesting that you got a lot of women coming to you in the same way I got a lot of women coming to my show. And I thought I was gonna be talking to a bunch of, like, 4-piece bands, 5-piece
Yeah.
bands. They're all kind of male centered. And, and
Yeah.
and I ended up not doing that.
Yeah, that's. I'm glad to hear it. So I'm not crazy. You just helped me make sure that I'm not crazy. So that's my sounding board. You helped me realize that, and it's strange, right? And I don't know what it is. I can't pinpoint it yet. I have my suspicions as why more women are just prone to sharing, but that's neither here nor there. But that's the nature of it. I hope it changes because I'm very open about what I do. And I think men should be too. And I think, like you said, it's an underserved community. Our women are not getting out, and so you found a niche inside the women and say, hey, these women are killing it right now. These
Yeah,
women
they
are
were.
doing their thing. They're in some cases even better.
Yeah.
Kevin O'Leary, Shark Tank,
Hmm.
said his best companies that he invested in that are doing extremely well are the ones that are owned and operated and managed by women. And
I think they
so,
got the fire in their belly. I think it's what it
yeah,
is like when you've been in the glass ceiling, right? And I think as black men, we run into that, right? There's a glass ceiling for black African American men and West Indian or any kind of African based people in the world, the way the world's structured. And I've run into it. I'm an IT guy. My day job is that I'm in IT, and I look around. I'm like one or two black guys in my department. That's it. And for the last
mm,
25 years, that's the way it's been, right? And I think when you've got that fire in your belly, and you're a female CEO or CFO, or you got your own business, you got a sole proprietorship, and you got that fire to succeed, and you're trying to prove that you can do it because you got that idea. And I think it's the same thing like we're driven, we've got ideas we want to push out. And we're trying to find other people who want to do that. And it seems like the women have really got, like I said, they got the fire in their belly who want to do
yeah, yeah. Facts. Hashtag facts. Big facts.
it. I want more brothers to want to do it, and I'm actually finding more. I've actually, since I started doing, it kind of reconfigured my podcast to include other people besides musicians. I've actually picked up a lot more men coming in. Still not as many women, but as many as I bring in on the female side. But I'm actually getting more people to come in, and I think that's always cool. I want to talk to everybody, and like I said, I talk to people around the world. So have you focused mostly in the US, or do you venture into other countries
So
in
I've
terms of
mentioned
like, yeah,
in terms of guests on the show.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I've had several guests from Africa, Nigeria on the show. And so I venture into other I've had a gentleman from England on the show. Similar thing. It's just because what the United States is doing is not we treat the United States like it's the center of the universe and it's not, right?
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
I
in China.
love yeah when I love getting other guests from other countries because their experiences are can help us also improve. Prime example, African culture, they do not believe in debt. I had a gentleman from Egypt. They do not believe in debt, when the American society would tell you borrow your way to success.
Oh
And
yeah,
so here's someone from Nigeria where the culture is everybody puts in, everybody chips in, everybody supports one another, right? We don't borrow money, we don't go to the bank because 9 times out of 10 the political corruption is going to prevent you from even getting approved for that loan. So the
mhm,
community chips in and the community works together to build whatever it is the community wants. So if we want to build a house, the community has to put together the resources and money to build a house. If we don't have money, then we have to put in and get the wood and the metal and the bricks, and we got to lay it. Who's a good brick builder and all that. So having that mindset can help us, I feel strongly, improve our situation. We're what the national deficit in the United States is what over $1 trillion in debt. Something
yeah,
has to change, and so we can look at our brothers and sisters across the water and say, well, maybe I can change this. I can.
yeah.
Maybe I
Right,
need
guys.
to take
Yeah,
this on
our
board.
our investment and savings. 'Cause I lived in Tokyo for 2 years, from 2004 to 2006.
Wow.
And I was working for an insurance company. We rebranded a company. We were actually I was project manager for a big insurance company. Came over there. We were competing with like Prudential and Japan and MetLife Japan. I was actually with Hartford Life Japan, and I was there. And what we had found is the Japanese retirement community. The Japanese post office acts like a savings and loan. And what the big companies like Mass Mutual, the Prudentials of the world and the MetLifes were trying to pull that money out of the Japanese post office and get these people to buy IRAs, universal life products, all kinds of variable life products to get
Mm,
that money. And we had resistance from the Japanese market. They were like, "We don't care." These retirees were like, "We don't want to buy that. That's Gaijin. That's an American company." It's like
right.
we rather go with a Japanese bank, and we rather keep our money in the post office because we know what that is, right? And so we had to do really heavy marketing campaigns to try to get them to be comfortable. we had to do it in Japanese language and figure out the culture. And it was a really eye-opening thing to kind of get into a zero defect mentality. The Japanese, I was in design, and Japanese like design is the lowest defect has the highest priority as the highest defect because the overall ideology is zero defect. Totally different than an American point of view. American point of view is if it's a level 10 weak low problem, you don't put as much attention to it.
Right.
That's not what the Japanese workers would do. And we kept on banging heads between American management and Japanese management.
It's perfection, right? It's the culture. That's why Toyota does so well, right? Toyota, that car is built very, very well, because they designed it and they believe in, like you said, just because this is a small problem, well, let's fix the small problem, and they're gonna continue to work on it, and improve it. So you're right, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why you get the level of discipline. You know, there's a level of discipline, like the business workers would stay in Tokyo all week and live in capsule hotels. They do crazy hours. And when I was trying to match with my Japanese guys, they're doing like 15, 16 hours and sleeping in a capsule hotel for 3 hours, then coming back. I said,
Come
weren't you
back to
just
work.
here? Yeah, weren't you just here? He's like, yeah, I just took a nap and I'm coming back because I got to finish it. Because it was like that whole thing. And they had this belief that goes back to their like really samurai culture and the Bushido culture and Shintoism is that they have a lot of pride in what they do.
Yeah.
And having a defect shames them. Like they don't feel good about it. They don't like, well, I can work on that. No, it's like super important. And it actually taught me a lesson in terms of when you're working, you should really care about what you work. And my grandpa was a coal miner and he built his own house because coal miners had to be plumbers, electricians, carpenters, everything. And so in West Virginia, he built his own house. And so he had that kind of self-reliance that you see, like you were talking about with in Africa, because he was, coal miner. My mom was a coal miner's daughter.
My grandfather was a Navy veteran, and same thing. He built his own house. So yeah, that hard work, that mindset, it's yeah, you're so right. And then Japanese culture, just speaking to what you just said, I think it's incredible. In Japanese schools, there's no janitorial services in the school system. Between a certain grade level, I believe, the children clean the schools. They're very responsible, and it's ingrained in them very early on. That alone would change the dynamic in our school systems, and I think it'll produce a different quality of children if we just. I mean, that's incredible. No janitorial service. The children clean the school. There's no.
Well,
no
also just thinking about the environment. I was living in downtown Tokyo, and it would be hard pressed to find any garbage on the street. And I was there for 2 years, from 2004 to 2006, and it wasn't a joke. They did not litter like Western, or at least U.S. people do. They just throw their McDonald's, they throw whatever. They don't do that. And then they also had a thing that was very interesting. They were all walking down the sidewalk in the same direction. And you could always tell somebody that was a foreigner or a gaijin, because we're walking like the wrong way. Because like everybody's walking like south, and Americans walking north on this in the same side of the sidewalk, and they decided like this direction should only be south. That's it, and everybody did it, and they very much are willing to not be so individualistic. They're willing to be more communal, which I think was a big revelation to me when I was in society. They had a tendency to be more kind of socialistic, but they're capitalist society, but they have socialistic tendencies, which is interesting.
Right. It is. So right.
But I think it's just cool to experience different cultures, because sometimes we do get a little xenophobic. We do think we're number one, number one. And then when you check the math scores, no, we're not.
True.
You take other countries and people know 5 languages and we know barely one.
It's true. It's true. We're not remaining competitive anymore. And and don't get me wrong, I gotta put this disclaimer out before I get jumped. But I love the United States. I love living in the United States and being born and raised here. But the trend, the trajectory that we're on, we cannot remain on it. Because we won't, I don't think we'll remain the superpower if we continue to do and make the kind of decisions we have, that we have been making. I was in the Navy myself, and so like in the Navy, you see the Navy ships, and just experiencing that for myself. And then I had the opportunity to tour a Japanese submarine.
Awesome.
Their submarine is night and day, not just in cleanliness or anything like that, but just as technology that they incorporate into their system. Am I saying that they're better than us or anything like that? But they, like you said, that perfection mentality, keep perfecting on something, even if it's the smallest thing. It showed. It really showed, and it was night and day when I went on board that Japanese submarine, and just seeing it's like, wow, slowly, we are lagging behind,
Yeah, I
big
mean,
in a big way.
if you check out Tokyo and you look at Boston or you look at New York, and I was there for 2 years, and it had such high technology, and then it had the classic Shintoism temples. In the middle of all this high tech, you have these
Ingrained.
2,000 old temples and people like sitting in the middle of the day and meditating and actually taking time out to meditate, slowing the pace and just going in there and just meditating, being very quiet. And you're like, wow, that's really interesting to have all this high tech and then still have this tradition that goes back thousands of years and have it kind of all happening in the same place.
Yeah.
And I think it was just a big revelation to me in terms of how you can, have spirituality, how you can have like sense of calm, of realizing that if you're going to work that crazy, you do need to kind of calm yourself. You do need to do meditation. I found the Eastern practices actually are very good for you, from a mind point of view. I just thought that it just was a big change in my life when I was living there.
Now I want a plane ticket. Now I need to go over there. That's what you've done. You've done it. You've convinced me. I need to go over there again.
Yeah, well, I need to check some other places out too. But one of the things got really interested in podcasting was just because of COVID, the ability to still connect to people. Did you find that your connections became exponential? Like once I met one person through a podcast, then I got in touch with their circle, and then they got me in touch with their circle, and then they just kept on cascading. And is that how you are able to kind of keep on growing your podcast?
I think through the connections, yes, because one thing leads to the next, right? So I've gotten referrals to people, and people are like, hey, come, I need you to check out this guy. I need you to see what this guy is doing, because you, Marcus, you and this guy will go great together. And so when the world shut down and people could no longer physically go to you and meet you or speak on a stage and have those same connection points, we gravitated to podcasters. YouTube, Google, Netflix, all these entertainment industries blew up because people were now at home. And so, yeah, I did experience that, and it was a huge thing. Now, I put that caveat out there that I'm an introvert by nature. And so sometimes people would see what I'm doing and they would want to connect with me, or they'd want to talk to me, or and I had to learn, because I was growing, I had to learn that as I grow, I have to kind of put some space between
Awesome.
there.
Hmm.
Because I also caught COVID. I was hospitalized for a month, and when I caught COVID, I watched a television show. They had it on a loop, and the show was how a social media influencer grew, and one of her fans killed her just
Oh
because
yeah,
they loved
yeah.
her so much. Like, it's
Hmm.
like, I gotta have you, I gotta have you. And so I realized as the podcast grew that I needed to put kind of a barrier between these. Hey, Marcus, come over here and fly out to New York, or fly to DC, or Marcus, I want to meet you. I'm like, okay,
Hmm.
buddy, I need you to
Yeah,
I
step
need to
it.
put a little.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
So
I think
that
yeah,
also happened too.
I've always kept it virtual on the podcast. I've never physically met anybody on the podcast just because of that. Because there's a whole history of music where there were famous. There was a famous female musician that had the same kind of situation. She was always signing all the autographs on the merch table, and a crazy fan came up to her, signed that, and he shot her. And musicians, we do have to worry about when we do live shows that you get that fan that stand, they just like they just want to believe everything. Lenin, we lost Lenin because of that. So there's always got to be some security when you're dealing with people, because not everybody is your friend. They might seem to be, and I like to be open, but you do have to have sense of security for yourself and your family. I've always tried to keep a barrier to a certain extent. I want to be open, but yeah, you do have to be mindful of not everybody's a friend.
Definitely, definitely. Or just some people are just not in a frame of mind,
Yeah.
right? To handle the connection, that connection. Sometimes people are just, they don't connect well and they don't blend well. So yeah, I yeah, very true. Very true. You're so right. Huge,
But the
huge, huge.
thing that there is a point where sometimes there are collectives of podcasters, and people want to have you go to a conference. And I think that's appropriate, right? Like, so if you've got a bunch of a mentor conference or an influencer conference and you get invited,
Right.
there's nothing wrong with doing that, but you do have to be mindful. Do you have one of your fans like stalking you?
Right.
So you be aware of what you do, and have your eyes open. Not that you don't do it. I'm not saying everybody just stay home, but yeah, you just have to you have to think it out and plan things out. It's like you plan things out, you don't give away things that you don't need to give away for your own security. That I think that's just being smart.
Yeah, all the sauce. Don't give out all the sauce. Yeah, I definitely agree. I definitely agree. And like you said, the conferences, the influencer conferences, the podcaster conferences, the networks, those are okay. With the understanding that, hey, you're not going to advertise my hotel. You're not going to
Yeah,
advertise.
don't tell me my room number.
Right, right. So yeah, there's definitely some security that has to focus around that. And I'm not there yet. But
Yeah,
I do want to graduate to the platform where, I can invite a guest on the show and there's a live stage, and an active audience, a participating audience. I do want to graduate to that, and I will. But even that, like, there's going to be a heavier screening process, far heavier than how I screen and my team screens applicants now. It's going to be even more intense because you're next to me. We're on the couch together and we're talking.
yeah. And then
So,
the choice is, do you actually go book a space for that to make sure it's not your home space? And I
right.
know there are some people like, well, yeah, I'll buy them. Yeah, but that's always a dangerous thing. See, like if it might work out fine,
Yeah,
and then until you get that one person where it doesn't work out. So
exactly.
it's kind of cool. I've always thought to build like a separate studio or rent a studio if I ever go to do that, or I actually go and set it up. So I go to a hotel and I
Mhm.
set it up, and I get permission that I'm going to actually record in this area, and you give me like a conference room and I can do it. And so you just book it, and then you at least have the control. You're in a public space that you booked it. You have like a trail. You can use the hotel security to make sure somebody has to come in. Yeah, there's things you can do where you can get it more in a more controlled situation, where you could like, I feel comfortable. I could have a physical guest come in and meet me because I'm not just by myself.
Agreed.
you know.
Exactly. Exactly. Absolutely. Don't want to be the Kobe Bryants of the world. Rest in peace. Rest in peace.
Yeah, it's just, but I think the future of podcasting is just wide open. I think that we this as a community, that we're building collectives like music collectives. If you see within music, that's a successful kind of strategy now is for bands to be part of collectives, and when they go on tour, there's like 10 acts, all part of this collective, and they take over the house. They take over the festival. Podcasters are starting to do that too. They're starting to do these big collectives of podcasters. They then can get like an audience to go to a convention and have like 10,000 people come see you, and then you're starting to get into that area where you're an entertainer. You're filling a venue.
Right.
You're getting percentage of that ticket.
Yeah. It's true. It's true. People who are able to influence change. And I think more than podcasting, I think we're entering the entertainment, like you said, the entertainment space. And so as podcasts grow in notoriety and podcasters grow in notoriety, we slowly become influencers who can shift a room in the direction that I need people to pay attention on. If there's a natural disaster, whose podcast can I go on to speak about a particular thing, to
Mhm.
shift the focus real quick, or shift the focus to something that really so we're becoming rock stars in this industry because we're entering the entertainment space. And so if you on your show can shift the audience to say, hey, there is a need over here, um that's where companies are going to put energy and dollars and capital behind. And so, like you said, we can all come to a room and say, we want Marcus, we want Phantom, we want this influencer, and we want to put them because they hold the audience that we want to speak to this dynamic, this thing. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it's like because if you think about like rock and roll kind of fell out, and now we're in the hip hop age, we're in the like electronic music age, and we're in the TikTok age where there's a lot of humor. A lot of what a lot of what drives even the music is like is a comedy type of aesthetic. That's what's really kicking on Twitter, on Reels. Those are the things that are going. And if all of us who are like, well, what about the funk? It's like, how would I do a TikTok about like funkadelic funk, and these kids just want to see me like making some kind of Saturday Night Live type of joke? And I'm
Yeah.
like, well, I don't know if I can do that.
Yeah. I think you gotta be really good, right? I think TikTok and all these social platforms are really weeding out the pretenders, right? Because you see singers, you come across singers on TikTok, on social media, but they're really, really good, right?
Yeah,
They're really good. You can't sit there and pretend anymore. You can't fake it anymore. And that's why I think people gravitate to the media and the comedy part, because I can make you laugh, I may not be a good singer. And so I
yeah.
think, and that happened to a young lady where she had a million followers, and then she bought a venue because she wanted to sell her product. She had started making jewelry. No
Hmm.
one showed up. Not one single person showed up because the following she built was geared for something else. They were
Yeah,
geared
that's the thing.
they were geared
That's
to
the thing.
this, and you tried to pivot to this, and no one originally supported that in the first place. You built the wrong audience.
That's the thing. Like a lot of musicians I've talked to have been scared of the TikTok kind of comedy because they would have to radically, like, say, if they're like an emo artist or you're a hard kind of driving hip hop artist and you're talking about gritty urban areas, and then suddenly, in order to get engagement, you got to do some kind of comedy thing.
You gotta be
Well,
funny.
you
Yeah,
get yeah, you get like a million hits, but that's a different audience. It's not your core audience. Maybe your core audience is 200,000. You got a million hits for this thing. Those million people aren't going to want to get into your hardcore crime rap. You
yeah,
know, they got into you because you did something funny.
yeah, yeah. To start the fire. Yeah, or you gotta if you're emo, you have to make a joke about emo and grab that audience that way through the comedy. Yeah,
Yeah, and then you might lose your hardcore audience that's willing to buy your merch because you
exactly.
sold out.
You betrayed
So
us.
you betrayed us.
Exactly.
It's like, oh, now you're done because like those are the guys that actually pay the tickets.
Exactly.
So you
Exactly.
do have to be careful. I think you have to kind of know who you are. I think you got to be. I think that's the core. I think when you got into this, you have to feel confident when you start doing like a video podcast. You have to learn how you can be one within yourself before you can talk to anybody else. In my
You have
opinion.
you have to have substance. I know a lot of people, there's a lot of people that follow me that started podcasting because they saw me podcasting. And I podcast on a very high level. And so they saw me and they're like, I could do podcasts. A lot of them don't podcast today because they got into it and they're like, man, this is work. How does because they thought they could do it, and they
Mhm.
didn't have the material to stay in the game. They didn't have the core, the substance to stay in it. So same thing like music. If you don't, like you said, if you don't have it in here, if you don't feel it, if this is just a trend, if this is just a hobby, you're not gonna last. You're not gonna stay in.
Yeah, you get the
Again,
one
I've
hit
been here.
wonder.
Yeah, a one hit wonder. And we've seen many of those, the little Bow Wows of the world, the Chingies of the world, the just in and out, the lollipop girl. my hip hop. What she said? My hip hop is popping. My hip hop is cool. You didn't hear about none of those
But it's typical trend
artists
in
anymore.
well, I mean, even going back to Motown days, like the trend in music always was like the writers would pass a song around multiple bands within Motown, and multiple bands would do it until one of them hit. And then that song, unless it didn't always mean that that whole band's gonna be successful. It's like that's a Smokey song, or that's a Marvin Gaye song, or that's the Funk Brothers wrote that song, right?
True.
So it's gold, and anybody who sings it right is gonna get gold. But you got to do it right.
True.
But yeah, I think the problem today is like you don't have this kind of, when I look at a guy like Stevie Wonder, look at Songs in the Key of Life.
Mhm.
That album is like fantastic. That like everything on that album is gold, and it's long and it's deeper than most people will go today. Most people won't go that deep. They just want to hear something they can jog to, something they can do to make their coffee to. They don't want to listen to something as heavy as Saturn or as heavy as Village Ghetto Land. They don't got the time. They're trying to. How are you going to listen to music if you don't take the time to listen to it?
Yeah, they don't want to listen to a story. There's a story. There's a message, right?
Yeah.
And that's how artists back in the day got their the trials of the time, right? Rap, especially rap, right? Police brutality, killing black people. That's
Yeah.
how they express their voice. That's how they got out the word. Like, hey, they're killing us out
Mhm.
here. They're not, and it's like, oh, now people are paying attention because there's a message in it. Now it's just like, what's it? Munch? What's the girl down? Munch? I'm munching. Like, what does
Well,
that
the
even
problem,
mean?
yeah, is the attention span because everybody's on their Twitter, everybody's on their reel, everybody's getting messages, and they don't have time to listen to a 5-minute song, right? They just don't have it. I'm old school. I still listen to vinyl. I still listen to my 8-track. I will listen to the whole thing, but that is not what the kids listen to. They listen to like 2 minutes. I'm listening to the 8-track version of Songs in the Key of Life because I still have it. It still works. And
Love it.
it is to me, it's like, I don't know, my papa got me into that. He would make me sit and listen to a whole Nat King Cole record. He'd make me listen to Marvin Gaye, what's going on, the whole thing. He said, you need to listen. I don't want you reading your comic book. Don't be doing anything else. Listen to the record. And he was a big music fan. And he kind of got me into it because he really took it serious as a fan. He wanted to listen to like everything and not be distracted. And my mom used to hate that because she'd be like, David, don't you need to do something? Hey, it's listening time. But
Love it.
it
We
would be
need to get
cool.
back to that.
I think some kids are into it. The kids who listen to vinyl, they get it. They know you don't skip a vinyl. There are kids who like to go buy vinyl, and some of those kids are engaging artists like myself and people who are more serious. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of like candy music, or like I call like fast food music. That's the kind of we had the fast food structure to music where it's like, oh, get it while it's hot, and then it's gone.
Yeah. Get in, get out. What's next? Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, that was the other thing too with cassettes. Like I remember having an old cassette player. Like you couldn't skip to the next song. You couldn't. You had to listen to that song, let it play. You could fast forward, but then you might miss the intro, or you might miss the
yeah, you were less
instrumentals. So
likely to do it. You're
you're
less
let
likely to do.
you
Yeah,
had to listen to the whole thing, and and then you take your pencil and you crank it and rewind it,
but the
right?
weird thing, it seems like hip hop and rap will get people to listen to a whole project, but popular music is stuck in this kind of like really kind of destructive structure where people just clone each other, and there's a lot of repetition, and it kind of like it can destroy the genre if you have too many producers doing the same thing. You get cloning, and like you said, you had people that saw you and then they kind of cloned your podcast and they fell off.
Yeah,
That happens in music all the time. You get one Beyonce and you get 100 Beyonces.
right.
And then everybody said, "Whoa, that's not really Beyonce." Yeah, maybe they have a hit, but there's like everybody's going to go with. If I want to listen to Beyonce, I'm going to listen to Beyonce.
Right. The
I'm not going to
original.
listen the original, not the clone, like the Beatles. Like, are you going to listen to the Monkees, or are you going to listen to the Beatles?
Right.
you know, the
That's
clone or the real thing.
that's so true. That's so true. It's so many. There's a lot of watering down, and that's why whenever I meet a young person that sits there and said, I met one today actually, at a gas station. He's like, "Oh, I'm a rapper." I said, "Okay." I mean, and to me, I don't want to kill his dreams or aspirations,
Hmm.
but unless you really have something different to talk about, or you have an edge or a voice, it's the same. It's and I feel for young men or young women who sit there and say, "Oh, I'm different. I'm my rap is fire. My rap is hard." Well, what makes it hard? What are you talking about? Are you talking about sex, drug, bees and hoes? And what are you talking about? If it's the same thing, it's the same thing. It's been
Yeah,
done. So
yeah.
what else you got?
Like to me, it's like if you look at it like a De La Soul. De La
Mhm.
Soul approached rap from a psychedelic kind of point of view, which was super unique even to this day.
Yeah.
Feet Hide and Rising doesn't sound like anything else. Nobody really sounds like them, right?
Prince.
Yeah, Public Enemy with the Bomb Squad.
Yeah.
They were using noise. They were
Yeah.
using really interesting samples that are on top of samples on top of samples to a point where their structure of their samples is art in itself. Like
Yeah.
music producers look at how they did it, and it's not just like Ice Ice Baby. It's actually really layered, understanding that music and putting things on top of each other. Like Dr. Dre does that too. But there's a certain level of artistry to certain levels of that type of clip based work. And some people are lazy and just take a beat like Ice Ice Baby, which is a Bowie Queen song, and then just put different lyrics on top of it.
Right.
Or do you do something more intelligent and you actually try to create something that has some kind of, what are you saying? Like you said, are you saying something unique that has never been said before, or your take on it that's unique because you're coming from a different perspective? If you're not, then like, what are you doing?
Nothing. The same thing.
Yeah.
Same thing. You're right. You're so right.
Well, I think we've almost hit an hour, and that's with our distributors. They kind of like us to keep it to that. So I know we've had a good discussion. It's gone in different directions, kind of like I like to do the jam band type of thing. So I hope everybody has liked what we've done here today. We do have your link to your YouTube channel there, and we want to make sure everybody checks out the link. It will be clickable when it gets published on Spotify podcast. And when it's published, the final publications on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook, you'll be able to click that and do support the people that we have on. And I do encourage everyone to check out your podcast because and subscribe. This is one big thing I always try to tell people. If somebody's got a YouTube, take the time to hit the subscribe button. Because if you took the time to watch it, please take the time to subscribe. It's very important to the individual creator that's out there. So I hope that you can do that. I love the fact that you came on the show today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. It is a true honor. Thank you for having me on your show. An incredible show. This has been incredible. This has been great.
Thank you.